Welcome to A Little TLC, the podcast where we embark on an enlightening journey through the ever-evolving world of education. I'm your host, Heather Volchko, and I'm on a mission to empower educators and change makers to skillfully navigate the intricacies of serving our most exceptional students. Every month, we'll be exploring a unique and timely theme in a mini-series format, whether we're digging into inclusive teaching practices, addressing student mental health challenges, or exploring the intricate connection between our personal and professional lives. Each month offers an in-depth exploration of weekly topics that truly matter. I hope you're ready to be both challenged and inspired because this is A Little TLC. So last week we were talking about just the big concept of self-care. And quite honestly, the conversation naturally led to why we don't do it. And so as we were talking amongst ourselves before we hit record this week, Chris and I were talking about how just there are so many obstacles getting in the way of choosing to actually care for ourselves so that we can care for others. And Claire, being fresh in, has like, here's the bullet point list of all the things that I want to try to fit into my career just right from the outset and the get-go. And Chris and I were both like singing her praises. So a little sneak peek into like behind the scenes of the conversation before we're recording this week. So I just want to jump straight in and Chris, you and I kind of rattled off a heck of a list here for there are so many reasons, so many directions of things that kind of get in the way. Sometimes it's our active choice, and sometimes it's the result of other choices. But there's just so many things that just get in the way of us actually caring for ourselves because we're so focused on caring for other people.
Absolutely. And it's easy to get into that mindset. You keep going, that motion creates emotion and momentum. And next thing you know, you're so far down the train tracks. You take a look around and you think, oh my gosh, I've left the station kind of off the planet now. So I need to make my way back. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think if we don't take an active role in this, um, nobody else is going to.
Hmm.
Right? We have to invest in ourselves and we have to do, all of that work because it matters to us and it matters to everybody else around us. Um,
So I love hearing you say this now, right? Because you and I worked together for years,
yeah.
and I think in both of our lives there are moments where we've got some good balance. I don't know if there's ever real true balance or whatever, but like we've got some grind moments and we've got some, pull back and pause moments, and it's sort of mixed in enough that it sort of feels healthy. And then there's also moments where it's just straight grind.
Yeah.
And there is almost like not even an acknowledgement or recognition. Maybe we're tired, we're exhausted, but like that's about it. But we don't necessarily feel like we have the margin to hit pause and make some other choices. So I'm wondering for you, like, what were some of those things that you noticed that kind of got you into like grind as norm? Almost in the sense that like we're overlooking you know, maybe not even feeling like we can make other choices.
Yeah. Um, it's very true. Um, you know, as a consultant, one of the things that I used to pride myself on is that I was a process specialist. I could go in and I
Mm.
could process through and I can keep chugging along and keep cranking along. And the amount of work and output I could do in such a short amount of time
Yep.
was it was what I was known for a
Mhm.
lot of things.
Yeah,
I
me
could
too.
go in and hammer out cases, right, and rip off
Mhm.
presentations and do trainings and working with a lot of people. And in some
It was like
weird way,
efficiency, right? Like efficiency
yeah.
is king.
Yep, absolutely. And it almost at times can feel a euphoric and addictive, right?
Mhm.
Where you're constantly doing this, and pretty soon it becomes that fabric of your being, right?
Mm.
You are constantly going and constantly working because there is never short supply of work to be done in education.
Yeah.
And most people in education, I won't say every person, but most people in education are human service oriented and they want to help their fellow human, little humans, big humans, all of them working in schools.
Mhm.
And we become individuals that want to help. And that is what drives us. It's what feeds us. It what motivates us. The late nights knowing that if I do this one thing, it might make that monumental impact for this one
Mm-hmm.
child or this one administrator or this program, or it might help set policy that will stop something from ever happening again, or whatever it is. And all of that
Yep.
stuff is important. The problem is when you look at the totality of all of those things piled up at one given moment, it's very easy to become overwhelmed. But if you pride yourself as being a process specialist, you're not allowing that mindset to creep in, that doubt or any of those pieces. You'll go forward, you'll take it because you'll learn and you'll enjoy that learning, lifelong learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Constantly going and grinding. And it's such an easy way, especially if you're motivated in this field, to drive forward and constantly be trying to find the places where you can be doing good, trying to help, trying to assist, trying to understand, trying to learn. But all of that, it's all I. I am trying to learn. I am trying to assist. I am trying to, and life is collaborative. That's what it is. It's the other people around you. And where it becomes difficult because as a craft, it is a marathon and not a sprint. You will never in your life, and I truly believe this, you'll never master that craft. You will be going and learning and changing and adapting and evolving and scrubbing the things, right? It's that whole repetition and contrast. You're going to do those things that worked for you. And if they don't work in that context, then you're going to contrast and you're going to change and you're going to try something different. But you're constantly going. And it's so easy to get stuck in that mindset, that very linear path of output, throughput, and processing.
That's such a systems mindset. Right, where
Correct.
you're so focused on, okay, what is the end result, the end product, and how is that gonna happen, and how many, pieces of that do I need to, put in to make that the reality of it, and then that has that ripple impact that affects all these other things, and then that means that the
Butterfly
next thing is getting
effect.
kicked off, right? Like, it's just this constant, but I mean, for me, starting in the classroom, IEP dates are still on the calendar. It's not like I can say, you know what, I need a self-care day. And like we just are out of compliance now, right? So like the dates are gonna happen. My students are showing up tomorrow, whether I am ready for them or not. Like there are just things that like keep ticking that I can't just pause and be like, you know what, I'm gonna go put myself back together and then I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna be okay for you. And that's where, for me, coming from the teacher side of things, I mean, I know you're coming from like the psychologist side, but for me, it was I need to I mean, very realistically, like I need to manage a caseload of 69 students across 4 grade levels in 3 different self-contained classrooms, across like all these things, and it needs to happen, right? I need to have 26 preps, and that means I need to have 26 classes of different things ready to go for tomorrow, ready for go for this week, for this month, and then I need to track all the data, and I need to be able, show progress on goals, and I need to report to all the meetings because I've now got a zillion of them because now they got all the re-evals and the manifestations and all the things, right? So I need systems. Like I need to have systems. I need to know how to look at curriculum, and I need to find the efficiencies and the supplemental resources that then are like grab and go that I can fit in, that can match in with the IEP pieces, right? Like I have to have systems or I could never possibly come anywhere close to what was being expected of me. But that's where I
Mhm.
wonder too, like there's this expectation piece. And is it expectations of like people that we're reporting to? Is it of our colleagues? Is it of our families, of our students, of ourselves, right? And then now we're having to meet all of these expectations, maybe some valid, maybe some maybe contrived, like maybe they don't even exist. It's just kind of how we're perceiving things. And now all of a sudden we've got this kind of perpetual rat race that we have now created for ourselves. But then because you and I are systems people, we're
Mhm.
going to have the processes, we're going to be super efficient about it, and we're going to be high performers, and we're going to be like, we're going to have that solid output. And then you get to this moment where you're like, holy smokes, right? Like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? And you kind of have that aha moment. And then it's the, oh, wow, like there's so many things stacked up here that are just truly cluttering my ability to see, honestly, kind of myself in the middle of all of those efficiencies and all of the things that need to get done.
This week, it's Hangout Week. Immerse yourself in an exclusive interview featuring practitioners just like you who are sharing their valuable experiences. Whether you're seeking motivation, knowledge, or fresh perspectives, our interviews cover a wide spectrum of topics, even some unplanned ones. We have found that pre-recorded interviews offer the flexibility you need to listen, pause, and revisit the conversation whenever is good for you. And did we mention you can earn continuing education units too? But that's not all. By becoming a member of the TLC Network, you gain access to professionals committed to walking this experience together. Learners get access to valuable webinars, enriching workshops, and engaging guest hangouts. Supporters gain access to our vibrant online community, monthly Q&A sessions, and joint discussions in a little PLC. Clever, right? Either way, you'll be among the first to access our podcast and blog pairing every week. Nurture your curiosity, broaden your perspectives, and ignite your passion by joining us for this week's Hangout.
Mm-hmm. And all of those things you said, the eyes will have it and they'll carry it all the way to the end. And sometimes it can burn you down for it too. It's collaborative, right? We are in this space for others, but yet we put so much weight on ourselves.
It doesn't really even seem like you guys are putting the weight onto yourselves, as like the weight has been already put on and like it's just left onto you to now figure out what to do with like 65 kids, which doesn't really seem fair to put on to like one person anyway. So like that would freak me out and stress me out, and I don't really know how one person can really be expected to do that type of a job personally, because I feel like you would need just like more people, because one IEP is 30 pages.
Yeah.
For 60 children that's a lot of math.
Yeah. And it speaks to the volume of the work that educators are doing on the scene, on the court, and behind the scenes. Because that whole dialogue is but two individuals, and there are hundreds thousands, if not millions, that are doing that same thing, living that same life.
Yep.
And I know, not one of my prouder moments, right? But I remember having a consult case once, and I was working through this educator who is struggling, and I'm helping, and I'm collaborative, and I've got the entire team there. And there was this moment at the end of the day, right, where I happened to be in my car, and we must have taken, so at that point in time, I was working about an hour away from my house, and we happened to be at a light at the same time. And you know how you pull up to a red light, you look around, and you kind of sometimes you see, oh, who's around me? Happened to be this educator, and she was in her car and she was crying. And the next day, I didn't have her on my rotation, but I made a point to go back. And one of the most just gut-wrenching questions that I had was, hey, I had an opportunity to see you yesterday, and I don't know if you saw me or not. I was in the Honda Accord right next to you, and I noticed that you were crying, and I have to ask you two questions. Is everything okay? And we had some discussion, and as we talked through that, the second question that I had was, hey, just out of curiosity, how many days is your drive home like that? Because she had disclosed in that conversation, amidst all these expectations and these stressors and all these things that are placed upon me, I found that the best way that I can work through this is to get a good cry out before I get home.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a gut punch. And it took my breath away. And I asked her, she said, it's maybe 3 to 4 days a week for the last 15 years. And it's what works for me.
Yep.
And it was in that moment that I realized this consult case really isn't about what it was presented to me by administrators. There's something bigger that we need to look at for this. But that is one person. And I'm sure that there are countless educators that would hear that same thing and would, whether they want to disclose it or not, would say, I've been there, I've done that. And that's self-care and resilience and relying on all of these skills and strategies. So it's where that comes in play, recognizing limitations.
And it truly kind of sounds like it's like almost despite what's going on around us,
Mhm.
right? That it's not, oh, we work in education and we have super stressful jobs. And of course, all of these things come with the territory. This is just, this is what you signed up for. You're an educator.
Mhm.
Um, so therefore, we totally understand that you need to take care of yourself so that you can come in and take care of other people. It's not that. It's not that we have skills. It's not that we have tools. It's not even that we are necessarily situated in a system that is kind of uh, doing maybe much more than lip service. That's why, especially in COVID, I got
Mm.
so done with like self-care, self-care, self-care. Cause I'm like, okay, cool. That's great words, but like, where's the actual time to do that?
Where's the actionable
And like,
things? Yeah.
how are we seeing the systems shift so that, we can do these things? I mean, we're actually really lucky right now. We're working with a district that is intentionally taking time away over the summer where they're not necessarily providing training. They are truly providing self-care opportunities for their staff. And that is counting for some of their professional development because it's like we have been on the grind and burning since like 4-ish years ago now, where the world
Mhm.
stopped on a dime and educators literally showed up the next week. We didn't have a choice. They said, your students will be in school, you figure it out. So 1 week later, where everybody else is trying to figure out like, what's a pandemic? What's going on? Educators are like, all right, I flipped my classroom. Now we have 15 different platforms and we're going to use this video thing and we're going to, get into this person's living room and whatever, and just make it work. And it just hasn't stopped. And so I love the fact that you're kind of acknowledging like, yeah, that stress load. I mean, you said 15 years, COVID
Yeah.
is not 15 years ago, right? So like,
Right.
this is not a new status of education, but it did spike and escalate in the past few years. And it hasn't necessarily like dropped much.
Yeah.
But that's also where we're seeing, how do I choose to engage in self-care? I quit my job, right? Like I leave education. Like there are lots of people that are making those decisions. And that's where we also look at, there's vacancies everywhere. And so staff shortages. And then we've got massive class sizes, which is extra systemic stress added in to this whole, crazy picture. So when we're looking at, are we choosing to take care of ourselves? Well, some of it, there is just a lot of roadblocks
Mhm.
in the system or in our workplace or in, kind of how we're showing up that makes it just really stinking hard, that you do end up in those moments where you're like, you know what? A good cry, and then I will be a good person for my family. And then I will, sing my music and I will take deep breaths and I'll do what I need to do to get in the headspace and I'll show up in the morning, right? Like, not exactly maybe the most healthy of options,
Right.
but it's what fits into the time that we have and, kind of like whatever boundaries we have to live within.
I also do feel like though when you get into a mindset like that though is like when you just like have to keep doing the thing is like that's how you end up burning out is because like you're just on autopilot at one point
Mhm.
and then you are watching a week go by and you're like, Hello, what even happened in that week?" Like you literally are just like doing the thing every single day.
It becomes, if you think about it, you look at the school year, you look at the calendar, right? And everybody looks for those palatable moments. Like, okay, we're working hard. And then the year comes along and then you hit your winter break. And people are like, okay, got some time off, right? But that's
Mhm.
time and distance isn't necessarily effective self-care. And it's not really assisting with that resilience, right? But then you're like, all right, now I'm refreshed. Well, then you slog back in January, right? Because now you're like, got to get back into it. And I'm ready to kick the tires and light the fires. And then you're like, oh, spring break's here. All right, got another week. And then it's like this constant staccato choppiness. You got some time and then you're out. And then if you think about it, if you look at the calendar, how back end it is in school, it's we're back in January. Well, then we got some days off in February, and then we're back. And February is a short month, and then we're back in March. Oh, well, but then we get a week off because now it's winter or spring break, and then we've got some time. And then everyone's got on the countdown clock. Oh man, it's April. We only got a little bit more, and 45 days, 20 days, 10 days, 2 days, right? We've survived. And then we've got the
Mhm.
summer, and then we do it again. But Einstein had it right, right? He said insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Are we insane? Right? I mean, I don't know. I love education. I love educators. It has been an amazing addition to my life, but I go back And I'll go back to the story, and I'll go back to what we were just talking about, that like resilience, right? And so one of the things I've always thought, and I'm no expert in this by any means, right? But I've always looked at it as the ability to bounce back from perceived failures or setbacks, right? And I've always add the perceived in there because it's my perception, and the reality of the world is my perception can't be wrong. If I pulled up next to that educator and her perception was that she struggled and failed and did a bad job that day because some lesson that she planned didn't go right, well, guess what? She can feel that way, right? And if another educator perceives that they messed up an IEP and he got to the meeting and it laid itself out on the table and it was very clear and evident to him, well, guess what? He can feel that way too. And it's how we perceive that adds to that stress, that anxiety, the perceptions. And so how do we get back? How do we root back around to becoming individuals that focus on self-care, focus on building that resiliency, and managing some of our perceptions? Because in the reality of it is we are our own harshest critics. I know that to be true in my
Yeah,
own lab.
absolutely. That's true for so many of us.
I feel like you could go by starting by like validating your own kind of feelings, and then not only your own feelings, but like validating other people's feelings, like like listening
Yeah.
to other people's considerations and then taking them in and navigating it through that way.
I love that because so many times in education, we are expected to do that for everyone around us. It's really cool that you're saying, no, 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 like you get to be part of that too.
Yeah.
Well, everyone should be heard. Everyone should have the chance to be heard. Like, it doesn't matter how old or young you are, like everyone's words should be heard at some point and then like respected.
One of the things that is so important in education is, if you listen to what, Heather and I were talking about, and there were a lot of eyes. And I said the eyes will have it, and they'll carry it all the way to the end, right? Every educator at some point, I'll throw another eye out there, but every educator feels like it's an eye, they're on their own island, right? And if there's ever a team sport, if there ever is a team sport that takes a village, it is education. And I feel like what we kind of talked about previously, about when we're focusing on self-care and when we're working on ourselves, it not only is for the benefit of us, but for everyone around us. And if you hear, a lot of times the perception is I need to I in education. But we also have to have the courage to go to others, to seek out others. I know my life and the way I look at things would probably, right, best predictor of past behavior is future behavior, or best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, right? I know I probably would have continued on the same path until I started talking with others and getting perspectives and hearing what they had to say and listening and letting them check my thoughts and ideas. And Claire, when you were talking about validating others and listening and being collaborative and having that bi-directionality, I think a lot of times that I think anybody would benefit from that, you know?
I feel like that's one of the things that I always had to like, well, I always do have to take into consideration is like if I am feeling upset for a certain way, like if I didn't get a good grade or something, like I have, like you were saying earlier, every right to be upset about that. Like it's just perspective, and like you need to be patient with yourself and take that into considerations. Like even if your feelings are a wave in a day, like you can have 15 feelings in a day, you need to validate each of those feelings because each of those contributed to your day no matter what, you know what I mean? But you can't get
Mhm.
stuck in that loop of a feeling. Like you can be upset for a little bit. Okay, that upset me. Now I got to move on, you know? Give yourself
Mhm.
10 minutes to be upset, but then pick yourself back up is how I've been trying.
I mean, how many times do we teach our students, right? Today's a new day.
Mhm.
And part of that is us choosing to acknowledge, yeah, what it is what it is. Cool. And we can try again.
Yeah.
What you're
And
saying is basically to do the exact same thing with ourselves.
Yeah.
yeah. And it's hard because how do we navigate that? I think when you're in an environment where money and expectations come so heavy on the table, seems like it's much more complicated. But it's interesting because I had somebody say this to me just recently in a conversation. And the administrator, getting ready to retire, said, it took me 30 years in education to recognize that I really did learn most of what I needed to learn in kindergarten, right? Like,
That's
Mhm.
so
listen to my body, listen to others, talk to others, value them, work together as a team, be inquisitive and curious. All of these things, I think when we get into that professional mind space, sometimes we lose some of those things. Or we just, I don't know, we forget them, or we don't apply them, or
Or
we,
they don't seem relevant, or we don't feel like we have permission to apply them, right? Like there's
right.
all of these things, right? But I think honestly, that is I think, I'm loving this conversation and I don't want to just like cut it off. Uh, but next week we are truly talking about how do we integrate this? So how do we have that professional experience and we have those workplace demands and the deadlines that aren't going to change, but then also have a life, right? Like have a life and be
Yeah.
a person, and have that show up simultaneously in some kind of an integrated manner that is really like us just getting to be a whole person in our own life. Hey, before you jump back into your busy life, we want to invite you to head over to thresholdlearning.org, your one-stop destination for all things TLC. Here you'll find our blog with this episode's show notes, our ever-expanding bookshelf of resources, and anything else we've talked about. Trust us, there's a ton of benefits waiting for you to explore. Just head over to thresholdlearning.org, click on network, and we'll see you on the inside. Sharing the podcast with your colleagues is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at Threshold Learning TLC on Facebook and Instagram. A personal recommendation is by far the best way to share the podcast. Let them know they can listen on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere else they catch their podcasts. Just be sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite platform. You can email us at info@thresholdlearning.org. We always enjoy connecting with fellow educators and champions for educational justice. You can find everything you're looking for at thresholdlearning.org. See you there.